Okay, then welcome back to the Conscious Contact Anniversary Mini Convention. Trying to stay in line on these steps here. We have 6 and 7. Scott S. is going to come up here and he's going to handle that, and then followed by that, we have 8 and 9 by Serena. Where's she at? Oh, anyway, she's here. She's going to be following. But anyway, welcome in, Scott. Let's get this done and stay in the
My name is Scott and I'm an alcoholic, and I'm back. Thanks for having me. Ron asked me to, or just stay. There you go. He asked me if I wanted to come up and, do an hour thing or something. Yeah, no problem. Anyway. If you notice, that third step prayer had no amen at the end of it. And I would like to think that this body of work that we're involved in right now is to be done prayerfully. Just a thought. So, we've admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And however inadequate our ideas about God were, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to this power, right? That God would care for us. In which way is God going to care for us? How am I going to turn my life and will over to this power? Well, first we're going to start this inventory process. We're going to share it with somebody. We're going to start to put our finger. We're going to start to scratch the surface on some of the things that have been blocking us from really finding out who it is we really are and where we really belong in this world. We are here to play the role God assigns us, okay? Now, we've shared all this with another human being in step 5, and now we're at step 6, and 6 and 7 hand in hand. Step 6, that we were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And 7, we humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. Now you can take the word selfishness and all of its manifestations and you get the word character defect. Shortcomings, faults, mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. But what we're trying to do is put our finger on the mistakes and the faults and the manifestations of self that are making our lives impossible, that are keeping us from growing spiritually and causing harm to others. Now, I believe that there's a school of thought in Alcoholics Anonymous, and just to get clear, like, my God is big enough that if God chose to tap me on the forehead and make me free of defect, then that would be so. Now, that hasn't been my experience. I don't know if there'd be any value in that. Because for one, I wouldn't be able to relate to you anymore, that you wouldn't be able to relate to me. I'd probably leave Alcoholics Anonymous. All right? But I'm desperate enough to keep showing up to the Creator and saying, God, please take me from where I am. Take me from this and bring me to where you would have me be. And it's not because of my successes that keep me doing that. It's because of my defeats. And in step 6, absolute defeat is the strongest position I can have. Just like in step 1, absolute defeat and surrender is the strongest position I can take. How do I become entirely ready to have God remove these defects of character? I need to be continually running into them and being made aware of them and watching out for them and running into them and being made aware of them. And it's over and over and over and over again. And then I'm ready to say, okay, God, I've had enough. This has no value or lacks value in my life. Please take this from me. Show me another way of doing business, because arrived at this point, it's been made very clear to me that character defect is how I do business. There's an old blues lyric, I've been down so long, it looks like up. All right, this is a life that I've built, right? I'm the Scott that Scott created, still here. Too much for my own liking, Yeah, granted, some of my grosser defects have been removed. Like I said, I was involved in all sorts of street level stuff. I was a street guy all my life. You know, I was an armed robber and all that when I was separated from alcohol. I mean, I was separated. I'm not a quitter. I didn't quit. The Marshal Service came and took me out of my house, and I was in serious trouble. All right, but I don't do that stuff anymore. Great, but is there anything else that is showing up in my life that lacks value? My inventory told me I need to quit fooling myself about values. Am I still introducing these ways of being, these ways of thinking? And I can't tell you that it's old behaviors or it's an old way of thinking. It's happening currently. It's a very current way of thinking, all right? I don't suffer from old ways of thinking. I suffer from very current ways of thinking. Let's get clear on that. I love that one. Oh, what's this? That's an old way of thinking. It's got me. But no, man. If it's happening now, it's very current. But am I still carrying that stuff? Do I still have what my sponsor used to call the smell, the stink of the street on me? You know, I'm not pulling armed robberies. I'm not doing that stuff. Well, of course I'm not. But how am I operating in my relationships? How am I operating on my job? How am I operating in AA? Like I said earlier, maybe I've appointed myself, I'm the self-appointed leader of my home group now because I'm a big book guy. And I'm going to straighten you all out. Right? Maybe I'm up here talking about this stuff and it's easy to talk about. I could talk about this left, right, center, from front to back all day long. But am I actually practicing this stuff? Have I become a teacher and I'm no longer a student? That happens all the time. I'm not interested in that happening to me. I've seen what it does. I'm just not. But here's the thing, it's absolute defeat that brings me to a place of being able to heal. Because that's what I really need. Is I've been operating out of my brokenness. I've been operating out of my woundedness all of my life. And if I don't get my finger on the pulse of what's going on and start to scratch the surface, and it says we scratch the surface. I mean, how long would it take you to scratch through that floor with your fingernails? Now, I'm not saying that to discourage anybody, but if you walk 1,000 miles into the jungle, how far you got to walk out? I mentioned that tap me on the forehead and make me free from character defect school of thought because I know it exists because I've run into it. I was at the Liberty Bell Roundup a few years ago, and me and my friend Dave, I was sitting in there talking with him, and I had just experienced some seriously embarrassing stuff going on in my life. 2 instances within 1 week. I mean, of some stuff that shocked me. It was bad. Well, it seemed bad. Okay? Spiritual life's very counterintuitive. And I had mentioned this earlier, that spirituality is really a messy business. You know? What's it supposed to be like being made new? Okay? So when you have jam on your face, don't be so sure it's a bad thing. I had said earlier also that life itself is going to bring to the surface every single aspect of my being, every part of me that has yet to know God. All right? And if I'm paying attention and I'm practicing the admittance of what's going on, I will become entirely ready to have God remove these defects of character. I can humbly offer myself to Him to remove these shortcomings and take them. And I can be healed. But I got to be paying attention. I got to be willing and ready to admit. So I share my experience with Dave. Because, I mean, I'm a the emperor has no clothes kind of guy. I really don't care. I'm not worried about losing any stripes. I'm going to tell you my true experience on alcoholism on any given day. If I see it suiting and serving, I'm sharing it, you know. And I share that stuff with my sponsor all the time. So I'm not here to share about the absence of alcoholism, because there is none of that. What I'm here to share with you is my response to alcoholism when it crops up. But when I usually don't think so, it can turn out for a pretty messy morning. So I was sharing my experience with my friend Dave about this messy morning that I had. And it was like, man, I was so embarrassed, and I was like, really, I couldn't believe how this just happened. And this happened to me twice in 1 week. I'll get to the specifics of it later. The point I'm bringing up now is this idea that we're supposed to be free from defect after going through these steps, which is absolute nonsense. There's no truth to that at all. a guy walks in and he says, "What are you guys talking about?" And I'm like, I look at Dave and I'm like, well, the best I could say was playing God in my life. Just talk about, playing God. And he looks at me and he kind of looks sideways. He goes, "So you still play God in your life?" Which I thought was the greatest question ever. I'm like, well, yeah, absolutely. And I said, you don't play God in your life anymore? Because he's looking at me like I'm some poor sod on the sidewalk with a beggar's cup or something that he feels sorry for. And he says, "Nah, man." He goes, "I went through the steps. I don't play God in my life anymore." And I said, "Wow, that's great, man." I said, "How long are you sober?" He said, 6 years. I said, "That's great." He said, "How about you?" I said, at the time, it was a few years ago, I was like 13 years sober. I said, "I'm about 13 years sober." And he goes, "Man, you must be a slow study or something like that." And I just laughed because I am, you know what I mean? It's like, if I learned easy, I wouldn't have to learn hard. That's my story. And I laughed. I said, "Yeah, probably, man." And then he went on to tell me about like his current situation. And it's like, I wasn't judging him harshly, but I just, he married a newcomer and she can't stop getting loaded and she's in rehab and all this. And I'm like, okay. So you don't play God in your life. Anyway, that's what we do. You know what I mean? He's an alcoholic. And the same lack of awareness that had gotten me into the position of the story I was just sharing about playing God in my life was the same way of thinking that had him in the position he was in. Do you get me? It's called alcoholism. And when I'm playing God, I usually don't think so, any more than he did. But I just thought it was funny. Just like after I went through the steps for the first time, I was going to take this infancy of an awakening that I had, and I'm going to go into my local AA meetings and I'm going to shoot the wounded. All right? Character defect is how I do business, and I'll tell you what, you can write all the character defect lists you want. It's still not going to give any leverage. All right? For one, nowhere in our literature does it say, then we take this list of character defects and we take them out in the yard like clay pigeons and shoot them down. Now, that might sound like some, secret handshake type stuff that we're going to get some power from, but it's absolute nonsense. There's no truth to that either. And I'll tell you what, shooting clay pigeons is a lot harder than you might think. Ask Katie P. She'll tell you. She's like a pro. But me, I'm not. I can shoot stuff when it's moving slower than that, but anyway. We're not going to get any leverage on these things on our own. We're not going to get any leverage on these things by writing out character. Because I'll tell you what, alcoholism goes underground and resurfaces in other areas of our lives. It's just the same thing. We're in a different hat. You know what I'm saying? We're not just going to get up there and knock down our character defects. And the truth is, they don't have a name other than selfishness, dishonesty that stems from the selfishness, self-seeking, resentment, fear. That's the stuff that we're encouraged to watch out for when it crops up. All right? And all the manifestations of self that we can attach to that, we need to pay attention first to watch out for this stuff, to be entirely ready to have God remove these things. Because after my fifth step, yeah, man, am I willing to have God remove these things? Yeah, absolutely. And I'm lying. Because some of this stuff, I'm still going to try to employ it into my life in a useful way. It's just that way. I've been doing it all my life. Now, on some aspects, yeah, I make a complete 180 shift and I leave that stuff behind. But then there's some other things that are going to continue to crop up. I'm going to continue to deal with them. But I'll tell you what, if I'm unable to begin to heal from this stuff, then I can write all the inventory I want. It'll just be a way for me to document bad behavior. But am I making any progress? Everywhere in our literature, it talks about the progress that we make. Not so much the elimination of. I mean, we've eliminated our drinking, absolutely. I've absolutely recovered from drinking. I am a recovered alcoholic, and what's that mean? I've recovered from drinking 100%. I haven't so much as thought of a drink in over 15 years. That's the God's honest truth. And for the rest of the stuff that crops up, I have a response to it. All right? That's my experience. I remember saying to my sponsor, I'm like, and like I said, my sponsor lives in Denver. So we're doing all this on the phone. I'm like, Mickey, excuse me, when am I going to break into the clear here, man? Basically, when am I going to not be alcoholic anymore? Like, I thought my illness would stop messing with me because I went through these steps. And that is not true. And I'm like, Mickey, when am I going to break into the clear here? And he laughs. And he says, Scott, I'm not laughing at you, man. He goes, but I'll tell you what, brother, you'll break into the clear when they pull the grass over your face. And until then, you're going to have to practice this program. And I said, all right, I'm on board with that. But how long is it going to take? I don't know. You walk into the jungle 1,000 miles, you got to walk 1,000 miles out. And it's going to happen in God's time with our willingness. It's still going to happen on God's time. My willingness gets me to the table, makes it possible for me to let go. But God's going to do the change, and God's going to do the healing, and God's going to do it in His time. God's ways are not my ways. A lot of this stuff makes absolutely no sense to me. And it certainly makes no sense to me in the moment. I'm a rearview mirror kind of guy when it comes to God. I may not see the value in any given situation in my life, and I feel like I'm just getting pounded out. The past year of my life, I feel like a piece of veal pounded thin. My experience has been forged out on an anvil. I mean, I'm a decorative plastering contractor. I'm a master plasterer. So I know how to sculpt and make and create ornament, mold making, model work, and I know what it takes to, take a piece of clay, a lump of clay, and turn it from that lump of clay into something leafy and beautiful, like maybe a Corinthian capital, and then make a rubber mold on that so I can cast many. But that lump of clay, it doesn't want to cooperate at first. You have to heat it up. You have to heat it up, you have to cut it, and you have to fold it, and you have to pound it, and you have to knead it, and squeeze it, and pound it, and flatten it, and fold it to get it to work and get it to do what you want. But when you're done, it's a beautiful piece of art. All right? Now, I am that piece of clay on any given day. I'm getting pounded, I'm getting cut, I'm getting folded. Michelangelo's David, I believe, is the most beautiful sculpture I've ever seen in my life. And I've never seen it up close, but I've looked at it in detailed pictures. It's absolutely gorgeous, but when he was asked how he made it, he said he just took everything away that wasn't David. All right? Now we're in a process of removal here. And God's going to remove from us, if we are willing to admit what's going on with us, God's going to remove from us every single defect that gets in the way of us and Him and our usefulness to the world, to AA, to our jobs, to our relationships. But what's the price? What are we willing to give up? Everything that I am, that's what it costs. All God wants is all I have. Am I willing to give up everything that I am right now in order to experience God and make myself useful? Find out what it is that makes me useful. I am here to play the role that He assigns. Am I really here to play the role that He assigns? Or am I here to talk God with my lips, and then I'm going to go out there and make all my dreams come true? Create your own reality. And we live in the instant gratification era. God cannot be had on those terms. It's not going to happen. We're used to Googling information and getting immediate gratification out of it. I want to find something out, bang, there it is. I want to find out where I'm going, boom, there it is. And we want to have God on those terms as well. Clarity we want to have. God always is. God can always be had. But we want the clarity on those terms. And if it doesn't come, we'll make it up. And that's where we can get into trouble. Patience. I said spirituality is a really messy business. I'm not kidding. And the book hints towards that in different places. And one of them is Down the Shade, where it says we're not likely to be inspired at all times. We may pay for this assumption with all sorts of absurd actions and ideas. But there have been a lot of times in here that I've had jam on my face. I remember asking Mickey another one. Sum it up for me, Mick. What's Alcoholics Anonymous all about? If you could sum it up in one word. And he sat there for a minute, and I'm like, come on, give me the goods, you know. He says, Scott, Alcoholics Anonymous is learning to live with jam on your face. What? What, that's it? And I didn't understand what he meant, but I do now. Anybody see a monarch butterfly? Anybody familiar with how they live? What their life cycle's like, man? They make this incredible journey, like from here to Mexico and back and all, to repeat the life cycle. And they're some of the most beautiful creatures I've ever seen. You know, living creatures in the insect world is a monarch butterfly. And what they go through is a lot like we have to go through, you know. They start out this slug-looking caterpillar, man. It barely even, it's like, how does that thing even move, you know? It looks like something you might want to step on if you've seen it and you were a little kid and didn't know any better. Then they go up into a tree, like a milkweed or something, and they go up there and they form a chrysalis, this cocoon around themselves. And inside that chrysalis, inside that cocoon, all alone and in the dark, they get completely destroyed. All alone in the dark, liquefied, torn to shreds, and destroyed in order to be made new. And then emerges this beautiful butterfly. Now, they do that because they're wired to do so. If that caterpillar had a choice, do you think it would do it? We have to volunteer for that in order to be made new. I have to volunteer for destruction. And it doesn't happen all at once. It's like this book, a page at a time. And I have to show up to God with a volume like this, one page at a time. God, I'm done with that. God, please take this from me. God, I don't see the value in this anymore. Right? Doesn't happen overnight. Now, I'm a word guy. We just went through steps 4 and 5. If I spent an hour and 10 minutes on it, it was an hour of it was in the inventory process. 10 minutes of it was on the 5th step part. There's a lot of stuff in the inventory process, a portion of our instructional portion of our book here that we could talk about. And people love words, especially when it's time to get up here and talk about a particular step. But step 6 and 7, what is it? Is it even 2 paragraphs? Not even, really. I mean, there's a prayer that makes up 1 paragraph. And then there's about 50 words in the other. Step 6, we emphasize the willingness. So what am I? I'll just read these 2 little paragraphs and walk away? That's all? Like step 6 and 7, really, it can't mean that much. I mean, there's nothing written about it. I would submit that it's everything. Everything that we do in Alcoholics Anonymous is to bring us to this point. Over and over and over and over and over again. Is to show up to the Creator to be healed. Over and over and over and over again. And if I don't show up to the Creator to be healed, and I'm not willing to do this, I'm not willing to be healed and let go of my life, then I'll get to document bad behavior for the rest of my life. I'll be led around by the nose by my illness for the rest of my life. And that'll be my legacy. And I can get my life to a place where it's materially comfortable, and I can stop the flow of change in my life and just hang out here in gratitude. In gratitude for a material experience. That's what we could become prey to. Also, the feeling of comfort. Because freedom doesn't feel free a lot of the time, you know. What's it supposed to feel like? How do you think that caterpillar feels when it's getting liquefied and torn to shreds and destroyed? All by itself in the dark to become that butterfly. What's that supposed to feel like? All right? So I need to detach from feels good means good and feels bad's bad. That's like elementary school description of the whole thing. I need to start detaching from that. Those chains of bondage need to be cut. Imagine, I mean, it can't mean that much because there's not a lot of words about it with 6 and 7, but could you imagine our program without step 6 and 7? I mean, could you imagine? Where would we be? What would we do with all this stuff that we were just talking about in the previous 2 steps? All these things that are in my makeup that have no value and making my life impossible. All the selfishness and dishonesty, all the manifestations of self, all the driven by fear. Talks about 100 forms of fear. I couldn't even name 10 off the top of my head. I'm driven by 100. Being an extreme example of self-will run riot, though, I usually don't think so. Where are we going to go with that stuff? Just have a nice day? Go to your next big book meeting and talk about what? Where am I going to go? You know, without step 6 and 7, we got nothing. Down the shade, when it says when these things crop up, what's the first thing it does? It says, we ask God to remove them at once. Excuse me. Always referring us back to God. Always. Can't go anywhere without Him. 6 and 7 is actually the first step for the rest of my life. Step 6, we emphasize willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? Can He now take them all, every one? Do I believe He even will? Is my God big enough to do this? If we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing. Pray for the willingness. We hear that all the time. You know, that's the stories I was talking about with at that Liberty Bell Roundup. I mean, I don't know how a lot of you folks came up. Everybody's got their different ways of looking at things, but like for me growing up, you know, you had to be tough. You had to be tough because if you weren't tough, you were weak. And if you were weak, you were going to be a victim. And I didn't want to be a victim. And the whole victim or weak thing and tough guy stuff, you know, that I built my life on that. So for me to come in here and say, well, absolute defeat is the strongest position I can take, that makes no sense to the thinking mind that showed up to this work, that walked in here, that just found out that, hey, character defect is how I do business, and now you want to take everything that I am. And it's only going to happen in God's time with my willingness anyway. You know, if you try to pull the skin off of a snake before it's in season, you'll kill that snake. Snake's going to shed its skin in its season. You're not going to pull it off anytime soon or you'll kill it. We're going to shed these things. I think God may have a better idea of how free I'm going to be able to get this incremental program, this incremental trip that I'm on. Now that doesn't mean, hey, I can just kick back, relax. I don't have a whole lot of changing to do right now because God's going to tell me all about that. Like God's going to knock and say, hey, Scott, it's time to change this today. That's not how it works for me. I always need to have the willingness to change. But these things will present themselves, and if I have developed the ability, the understanding of what's going on here, then I'll be able to spot this stuff. And if I have the right sponsor, who's actually a student of this work as well, and doing it themselves, might be able to take me to the places I don't want to go. Now, I had talked about, you know, things that had happened to me as a child. I had no idea. I was not conscious of how I would defend myself throughout my entire life because of these things that had happened to me as a child. These things had changed my life forever. Right? I talked about that in step 4. Where the mistake in looking for my part, because it never asks me to find out what my part was, because in some stuff we don't have a part. It asks me my fault. I look for my own fault, my own mistakes. Right? Things that happened to me as a child that I had developed these defenses, I wasn't conscious of them. How could they get removed? I'm not even conscious of this stuff. I have no idea what's going to trigger this stuff. And I'm not talking about triggers like people, places, and things, and need to stay away from a drink, or don't go past the bar, it might trigger me a drink. I'm talking about some deep wounds, some extreme brokenness that I have inside of me. And if you touch that, if you tap into my brokenness, and I am not I am not centered, or I haven't dealt with this or been healed from, or even started to experience healing in this area of my life, and you tap into that, you better watch out. I have no idea what's going to happen. And I'm walking around with these ticking time bombs in me, and I had no idea about it. I had no idea what was capable of happening until I had that jam on my face, and I was absolutely embarrassed beyond words. And I'd walked into the Liberty Bell, and I was sharing this with my friend Dave at the registration table. I was driving down Kensington Avenue in Philadelphia. If anybody's familiar with Kensington, it's like a third world country. It really is. It's an open air drug market. That's where my shop is, my mold making shop. And I'm leaving my son and another apprentice in the shop, and I'm headed to a colleague of mine's place on 4th and Girard. So I'm driving down Kensington Avenue. It's like, early morning. Everybody's out getting what they need. And I'm sitting in this line of traffic, and I look in my rearview mirror. There's a narcotics cop behind me, task force guy. And I know what they look like. I know who they are. And they're behind me. And I didn't think nothing of it. Light turns green, start moving, bang, they light me up. I'm like, come on, man. Pull over, What's up? 2 cops walking, one's down to one side of my car, the other comes in, they're both looking in, they're looking in the back seat. And I'm like, oh, here we go. You know what I mean? I'm like, what? You know what I mean? I'm white guy driving a Cadillac early in the morning. You want to check me out? I said, listen, I'm not copping dope. Right away. He's like, oh, he thinks that we think he was down here copping dope. And they both laugh and all. I mean, I knew they were checking me out because they thought I was copping dope. But I let them have it right away. I was resentful immediately that these 2 cops, how dare they come and check me out? Don't they know I'm the AA guy? Right? Now, had they told me to drive on, that might be as far as it ever got. But it was time to expose some brokenness, I guess. Nothing happens by accident in God's world. I mean, I believe it. As horrific as some of our experiences have been, if I can experience healing inside there, then that was shown to me to benefit others. So anyway, he starts giving me the business. And he's telling me, oh man, let me see your registration and all this. And I'm like, look, there was a discrepancy on the registration, but I had renewed it through my insurance agent and all. And I'm like telling him all this. All my vehicles, I get renewed. My agent takes care of that. So like, whatever you're showing me, that's nonsense. Oh, is it? And this and that. And I said, my brother had just OD'd and died from fentanyl overdose. And I said to him, hey man, why don't you go around the corner and get those guys that sold my brother the fentanyl to kill him? And he looks down at me and he smiles and goes, oh, we're going to go get them next. And I went nuts. And he's writing a tow order for my car. He's going to give it to me now. I get out of the car and I go crazy. I go absolutely crazy on this narcotics cop. And I mean, I'm in his grill and I'm giving it to him. And I'm waiting for him to flinch and I'm gonna hit him. I mean, I'm giving it to him it's like a suicide mission. I couldn't stop myself. And I remember his partner, and I'm telling him, I'm letting him know you're abusing your authority. And I'm calling him every name in the book. I mean some real vulgar stuff. And letting him know on top of that, you're abusing your authority here and you're way out of line. Like I wasn't. Anyway, his partner was standing there putting his head down and turning. And I don't know whether he was embarrassed for me, for him, for what his partner was doing to me, or he was just waiting for me to get tased and beat down or whatever. They could have done whatever they wanted with me. And the guy, he didn't cave into me trying to lead him into something. You know what I mean? He didn't cave. Thank God. That would have been the worst day for me that I experienced in a very long time. And then what happened was my truck got towed away, my car rather. And I remember I'm on the phone with my son. Now see, now my son has to experience this now too, because I'm on the phone with him. He's a couple blocks away in the shop. And I'm on the phone with him saying, get over here and pick me up. I need to make this appointment. But my car's getting towed. And he's like, what happened? Your car's getting towed. And I'm like, hold on a sec. And I lean into the cop's car and I give it to him again. You're going to be in court, officer, blap, blap, blap. Oh, I'll see you in court, you boop, 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 boop. All this stuff I'm saying. And my son's like, what the heck? You know what I mean? So now I've been driving around for 2 years with an amends letter in my visor for this police officer. And I had to make amends to my son too. I had to allow him to experience that too. But I remember afterwards, it was like, you ever watch a balloon just get deflated? That's how I felt inside. I felt so awful, and I'm like, what just happened? I couldn't believe what just happened. And I'm standing there on the street, and it was like, oh my God, man. Have you ever just blown up your life and you don't know what sparked it? And I had no idea how I had gotten to this place. My son came and got me. We spent the next half a day going to see this judge and get that and get a thing signed and pay money, get my car back and all this stuff. And I write this amends letter. And this was actually incident number 2 that week. The first incident was a guy rear-ended me in my caddy and took off. And I get out and I'm looking at the guy and he's driving away, like looking at me all goofy. And I'm like, where you going, bro? He just rear-ended me. And this is on Delaware Ave. He takes off and I catch him. And I'm on the phone with the cops. This was in the beginning of the week. The cop thing was at the end of the week. It was just a bad week. Anyway, it was time to heal. So I'm on the phone with the cops. I'm like, hey, this guy just rear-ended me and took off. And here's his license plate and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, you're not pursuing him, are you? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, well, don't do that. I'm too late, you know. I'm on this guy, man. I'm like Columbo, man. I'm following the guy. I'm catching him. So anyway, I do catch him. And he takes off again. I finally catch him in South Philly. Now, I know South Philly. You ain't getting away. That's my neighborhood. I get this guy and I make him pull over and I jump out of the car. And I'm like, yo, man. He jumps out, and when he gets out, he pops the trunk. And I'm like, what's that all about? So I beat him to the trunk. And I look in the trunk, there's a pair of sneakers and a baseball bat. And that's it. So I'm like, he ain't going for the sneakers. You know what I mean? So I'm like, grab the bat. And I just shut the trunk, so neither one of us are going to get to it. And I grab the guy, and I grab him, and I throw him on the sidewalk, and I got him. And I'm like, dude, you make one move, man, and I'm going to, whatever, you know, telling him how I'm going to handle him. And I'm on the phone with the cops at the same time, and they hear me. And I'm like, if you make one move, I am going to, and they're like, sir, where's your location and all that? And they come right away with the lights flashing and all that. And I'm real happy and proud of myself because I didn't hurt the guy. And he didn't look like the kind of guy that would pull something like that. I was shocked. But anyway, I call my sponsor and I'm like, Mick, you ain't going to believe what just happened. Blah, blah, blah. But I didn't hurt him, you know? And he goes, yeah, Scott. He goes, what if he pulled a gun? I'm like, oh, I never thought of that. I was all proud of myself that I didn't hurt this guy. And here it was me playing God and selfishness, self-centeredness, extreme example of self-will run riot the whole time. Though I didn't think so. I was patting myself on the back because I didn't hurt him. Here I put myself and everybody else's life in jeopardy, and his, so that I could, I don't know, wrest satisfaction out of the situation somehow. I didn't see that. Then we had the cop incident, and I felt like, I couldn't believe what just happened to me. And it was Friday night, time for my call. So Mickey and I start talking, and he knows my history. He knows, you know, when he told me, it's like early on, you know, Scott, in your beginning, God created Scott. He goes, but then you created Scott. And we're going to try to get back to the Scott that God created. You know, we're going to find out what makes Scotty run. And we need to heal from that stuff. And we start talking. And from a very young age, I was abused by people in positions of authority. You know? And I mean, as I got older, see, I'm not that little kid anymore. And as I got older, I'd show anybody that you're not going to abuse me. And I was with people that were powerful. You know, I got with powerful people when I was a kid. And because what they had, I wanted what they had. And I'll go like right to hell behind this stuff. But you weren't going to hurt me. You weren't going to hurt me, and you certainly weren't going to abuse me and get away with it. So I was willing to risk my life and anybody's life around me to wrest satisfaction out of that situation where somebody tried to hurt me and get away with it. The guy that hit me and took off. Then I have this police officer. First he's inconveniencing me. And then he's abusing me. This guy is in a position of authority is going to abuse me? I don't think so, man. I'll go to war with you and I'll die behind it. And I could have literally died behind it. They could have shot me right there and they would have been able to scrape up enough justification to get away with it, most likely. But my pick struck gold. I was made aware of areas in my life where I hadn't received and experienced the healing that I need to in order to continue living my life in a productive and useful way. You understand what I'm saying? And as messy, like I said, spirituality is a messy business. Healing is a messy business, man. If I need rainbows and unicorns, I'm in serious trouble. You know, I had to let go of all my ideas about God in order to experience God. Because the physical fantasy about God that happens without even, at the speed of thought, that stuff happens. We're not even conscious of it. You know, all that stuff has to be smashed in order for me to really experience God. And what I think the spiritual life is supposed to be needs to be set aside in order to experience the spiritual life. But I've been able to heal, experience healing. Like, when am I fully healed? I don't know. I don't know if I am, if I ever will be, but I'll tell you what. I know I've experienced enough healing that when that stuff crops up in a reality in my life, I'm able to handle it a lot differently. I'm able to ask for God's help. And when I'm conscious enough of something to ask for God's help first, the power's available, it's there, and I have a shot. But if I'm not conscious of anything that is broken inside of me, right? The real source of my character defects, not the ones that I might write down after my fifth step. That's horse shit. Excuse my language. That's nonsense. I'm talking about tell me where it hurts. Where does it hurt? I remember my sponsor asking me that, Scott, where does it hurt? And I thought, what's this guy talking about, man? What's this, some psychobabble stuff? Because we hear that, especially guys. That's why guys don't say, oh, I'm frightened. They'll say, I'm feared up. Yeah, you're feared up, dude. That's a tough guy way of saying I'm scared to death. I'm frightened. But this whole tell me where it hurts. Where's it hurt? I didn't know what he meant. Now I do. I'll tell you where it hurts. It hurts on a level so deep down that if I don't immerse myself in this work and open myself up to the change and the reality of that change, however painful it may be, I'm never going to find out where it hurts. I'm never going to heal from where it hurts. That's the reality of spirituality. A true transformation, a deep and effective transformation, something far beyond anything that I can fathom or comprehend on my way into this thing. It has to happen as I'm going through this thing. It's not like I need to get on board with all the specifics before I get in here, because you don't know the specifics, and you'd probably run out the door. I know I would. It's like, you know, this whole snake thing. The snake sheds its skin in its season. When we're ready to experience healing, life itself is going to bring up all the areas in me that have yet to experience God. And only if I'm in this work, if I am on board, I'm on the beam, I'm in. Put me in, coach. Am I going to get to experience that healing? Am I going to be able to take advantage of such an insane situation that happened in my life? And not try to sweep it under the carpet and keep it from you, but to share it with you, so that someone else might be able to experience healing. Instead of putting on my AA game face and acting like everything's okay, and since I went through this work, I don't really need to do any of this stuff anymore. You can come drink from my cup, kiss the ring, join me and my fellow wizards at the round table, or some kind of nonsense like that. Like this fairy dust is going to rub off on you, and you know, come be like me and go through this work. Go through this work so that we can heal from the stuff that's happening right now, that's going to be happening. Open ourselves up to some healing. I'll tell you what, we're not going to invoke direct contact with the spirit of the universe and keep all our duckies in a row. It's not going to happen. You ask for change, well, here it comes, brothers and sisters. Better hold on. You see where I'm going? If my life hasn't been turned upside down, have I really surrendered to this power? Right? Because I need signs. I don't even know what to do with this thing. Okay, I think I do. It has to be a sign, right? We think signs are going to come over us in a warm, fuzzy feeling. Not a cop beating me over the head with a baton or getting maced or something. You know what I mean? Whew. I'm really immature. Especially in my ideas about God and my expectations of Him. God, you will reward me here on earth for choosing you. Right? How immature. It's funny, I share that story with a friend of mine. And like right after it happened, we were like out in the middle of the Delaware River on my boat. And he had tied his jet ski up to my boat. We were eating lunch on the boat. And I'm like, dude, you ain't going to believe what just happened to me, man. And I explained these things. And I mean, I don't like to talk about stuff until I get kind of clear on what has happened, you know. But like I'd already gotten pretty clear on, you know, somebody tapped into and put their finger on some brokenness inside of me. And it went really bad, okay? But I got to experience the beginning of the healing process and getting clear on where I'm wounded. And I'm sharing this with him anyway, long story short. And he says, hey man, you want to speak on 6 and 7 at my conference next year? I'm like, oh yeah, I guess. Now I got to tell this whole thing over again to 800 people. But I guess the point is, we're supposed to be talking to each other about that kind of stuff. You know? And don't be afraid to lose your stripes in here, because we don't have any. You know what I mean? There is no hierarchy in here. Servant, humble servant, is the highest position in Alcoholics Anonymous. So if we got stuff going on with us and we're afraid to talk about it, we need to talk about it. We need to be talking about it with somebody. We don't have to get up to a microphone or in front of our home group and share it with the whole meeting. You know what I mean? But we need to talk to somebody about it. Now me, I don't care. You know, if somebody thinks, oh, this guy's nuts, or you know, he's this or that because he's talking about this crazy stuff that happened. Hey, that's my life. That's my life. And I've been a seeker of truth since I stepped on this path and opened this book up with my sponsor, who's been, you know, doing the same thing he showed me how to do. He's been doing for like 45 years, 46, I don't know how many years, long, in the 40s, you know. And I mean, he's told me how his experience was hammered out on an anvil. I told you, this past year has been one of the most brutal business-wise years of my life. And I've absolutely dedicated myself to serving this one client to the point where it's really pounded me so thin. I just don't think I can bear it some days, and I do. God gives me the strength to do it. You know, and it's not about the money. And I remember having an architect last year who had come at me, and he was a position of authority on the job because he controlled the purse. The purse strings were controlled, but the job was set up very oddly. No GC, architect trying to run things, which was a disaster, and he kept putting these delays on me. I mean, like 10 weeks worth of delays. Just made the job impossible to do, and I kept submitting these change orders. Like, you know, I set this timeline that this is the price for this much duration, and if the duration gets extended, then it's going to result in a change order. Everybody signs off on it. Well, I started submitting my change orders. He doesn't want to hear it. Now you're not getting paid. You're not getting paid. I'm talking 10 weeks. It would have put me out of business. And I'm going to take this guy and I'm going to bounce him off every wall in that room. I mean, I'm not kidding. And I hate to always go back to violence and stuff, but okay, that's how it is. All right? That's where I seem to thrive growing up. So that was my go-to thing, you know, or I send a couple people to see you. But I asked God for help in those moments because I had experienced the whole cop thing and the guy that hit me thing, you know, previous to that. Now we're in the wintertime. I've been experiencing healing. I bring this stuff to God. I lay it on the table all the time. God, please take this from me. God, please heal me as you see fit. God, please place me where you see usefulness for me. And I just said, okay, Matt, you know, okay, you're not going to pay it. Okay, well, then I'm not going to come back. I'm not going to finish the job. I went around him. I set up a meeting with the owner. The owner was a straight shooter kind of a guy. And I remember Matt's office was like, oh, so you'll be back Monday to finish it? No, I won't. I won't. I can't. And it's just based on truth. I won't and I can't. And I didn't freak out and I didn't blow up my business and call him every name in the book, and I didn't put my hands on him. And I ended up going to the owner. The owner said, Scott, he was like on his way to Peru or something. He's like, Scott, when I get back, I'll take care of it for you. Don't worry about it. Don't even worry about it. And he took care of it. This past year, this job that I'm wrapping it up now, God really seems to get me in places like relationships, romance, and finance, you know. I decided to be of service to these elderly clients that had experienced a fire and, you know, their house is burned up and gutted, and I'm going to replaster the whole place, plaster over lath, and it's very, very detail oriented, and I can do it, so I'm not worried about that, but it's still a lot of work. Then, you know, the public adjuster had made some mistakes in the door openings and stuff. There was a lot of extra work involved, and I said, well, that wasn't part of the price. This guy laid into me the way I laid into that cop. Called me every name in the book, questioned my integrity. Guy never even met me. And all this stuff, man, and I just sat back and I let him go. And I let him go. I said, are you done yet? And he hangs up. And I mean, the me that showed up to this body of work would have gone out and found that guy. Or at least said, you know what? Give it right back to him. And I had the deposit in my pocket. I mean, I had their, you know, a nice chunk of their change, minus materials. I could have just said, hey, man, go find somebody else to finish the job. But I didn't. You know, we got on a conference call with the owner, and we talked, and the owner was like 82 years old, and he's like, man, I just want, you know, I don't want to, there was another issue with sprinklers and all this stuff because his wife wanted to give the house to the church or whatever. Anyway, it all created more hurdles for me. And I was considering just walking off and saying, okay, your material's out front, find someone else to finish this job. And I asked God what to, and the guy that had been giving me the business, I wasn't too keen on him anyway. But I stopped and said, all right, God, what do you want me to do? Where would you have me be? And the guy said, Scott, I just want the house back the way it was. And I wasn't even asking for more money. I was asking him to change these features, these unusual features around the door openings to lessen my workload. He said, Scott, I just want the house back the way it was. And I had asked God, what would you have me be? And the answer I got was, Charlie, I'll take care of you. Don't worry about it. That was the last thing I wanted to say. I wanted to say, you know what? You gave me 50. There's 30 grand out in the driveway. I got 20 grand in my pocket for my troubles. Have a nice life. And I'll tell you what, at this point, a year later, because the job went so far out of whack, there's days I wish I did that. Because it's a thankless job at this point. But I'm doing what God would have me be, which is to be of service to this client. But I'm telling you, man, it's like whatever the training is that I'm getting here, it's really hard. I believe we cease fighting everything and everyone, but I believe we fight for each other in here. Like spiritual warriors, man, but the training's really hard. But I'll tell you what, if we don't sign up for the training wherever it takes us, I'm not going to be able to help you. I'm not going to be able to say, me too. I understand what you're going through. I've experienced that in my life. I know what those wounds feel like in my life, and here's what I did, and here's the other side of that I've been able to experience. I mean, I was in a relationship for like 4 or 5 years up until last year, before Nilo and I met. And I mean, this woman was broken in many ways, just like I am. It's just her ways were different. Her wounds and brokenness were different, and they seemed to bring out the worst in me, because her woundedness would touch on mine. And I was able to finally get to a place, after over and over and over again, coming to this place again, over and over and over and over, repetitive admission of defeat. I got to a place where I love you no matter what. I love you regardless of your brokenness, just as you are, not the potential, not who I want you to be or wish you were, but who you were. And it didn't make any of her brokenness go away, but it made me able to be there. I was able to be honest and love somebody for who they were. And that, to me, was a wonderful nugget that my pick struck gold. It had great value. But then there was things about, she wanted to have children. I mean, I'm 50 years old. I'll be 51 next month. I didn't want to be senior citizen parent of a teenager, is that selfish? I don't know. But I'll tell you what would have really been selfish is to marry you and deny you children. That I could not do. And I had to end that relationship. That was 1.5 years ago. It was really hard. I loved her. But I have to live in truth. I have to live in the truth today. Dedication to the truth is a completely foreign concept to this guy that showed up to the work. All right? It's something I'm far more comfortable with today. And I mean, I can be dedicated to the truth and still not be comfortable with it. I don't have to feel good in order to be headed in the right direction today in Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't have to. I've cut the ties, I've cut the strings, the bondage, the chains to that way of thinking and being. Is that feels good. Man, I'll tell you, I was being led around the block by the nose by alcoholism until I was able to start experiencing freedom by being dedicated to the truth, by being disciplined. You ever see Cesar Millan? What's he, the dog whisperer, right? You ever watch him take a dog that's off the hook? Because it doesn't know its role, right? We're here to play the role God assigns us, right? You get a dog, and I'm not saying we're dogs, but he'll take that dog and he disciplines it. And it finds the role it was assigned in the pack, and it thrives in that discipline. We're the same way. Alcoholics thrive in discipline. You know what I'm saying? It's like my sponsor's like the dog whisperer, the alcoholic whisperer or something. But only because he's willing to be pounded out thin like a piece of veal himself in order to experience God. It's like all God wants is all you got. Right? What am I willing to put on the table? And I don't have the answer for you. But eventually everything gets put on the table in my camp, you know. And it's only when it's like I can't take another beating. You know what I mean? Like I said, if I learned easy, I wouldn't have to learn hard. I'm going to say this 7-step prayer if you'd like to join me. And you tell me, you ask yourself what this prayer means to you. All right? My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. We have just completed step 7. Now there's the amen that we were looking for. I want to thank you guys for the opportunity to be here today. And I'll see you around the campfire. Peace.
Thanks again, Scott. Thanks for sharing a little bit of your heart and soul with such passion. Very powerful. We'll take a 5-minute break. Thanks a lot.